Okay, I did that. I set it up.
Duane, do you want to share your screen?
Rose is trying to make some last minute adjustments.
So whose screen is this? This is Michael's screen, right? This is Michael.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think
just
we have to go to share screen, Rose.
Let me get this.
yeah, just to let everyone know their power there went out, and they just had to set up the
Yes, we're
generator and the internet.
experiencing a little technical difficulty, power outage, but we have a backup generator that's being connected up and appears to be working. So while they're putting the last touches on getting the screen up and ready, and you can hear my voice, I just want to extend my appreciation for the opportunity that the Moya Federation has supplied to be a part of this presentation, with special thanks to all of the participants who have taken time from their busy schedules to be a part of this. And of course, our techie geniuses, Michael, Rose, and BL, who make this possible, even, I might add, under adverse conditions. So excellent. We may have a few intermittent interruptions, but they shouldn't be too long, and I think we can just move right along. So, as a preparatory statement, and I do this at each presentation, I outline the importance of what the Tibetan shared when he stated that it would be important for us to understand that there is going to be a new presentation of occult truth that's going to go into the 21st century. And we have many, many opportunities to not only bridge, but to modify these ageless wisdom teachings and to make them more accessible to a wider audience or group of people. So that's basically the motivation behind this. And before we actually launch into this, I do want to share this quotation because I think it follows on the one I just shared, where DK says, "The old and outworn presentations were the product of the concrete mind and are therefore crystallizing in their effects and distorting in their results. The new approach, which I seek to indicate, makes its appeal to the abstract mind and to the soul, whose values are sound, and eventually to the intuition." Yes, we will be bringing in a number of technicalities as a foundational base, but only as a point of reference in which we can depart into the higher abstract mind and then eventually into the intuition. We're going to be doing a video, and I would like everyone here in the group to see this healing video with this fiery light pouring down into your life, integrating your personality, the mind, centering the emotions, and feel as you watch this video, this fiery light, which is just a symbol of your own soul light, discharging any ill health, any disease, or any discomfort that you are now experiencing personally in your lives. And we're going to use this same fire meditation at our closing, only we're going to do it as a group sent out on a planetary level to help heal in some small way a lot of the cleavages, crises that are taking place at this time. So take a deep breath and feel yourself moving into this purificatory fire.
Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Devasya limai Yona Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya.
Okay, excellent. We're going to dive in to primal causes. Michael Robbins used to speak of infinitude, and he gave a number of presentations, lectures, and wrote extensively about the importance of dealing with meaning, cause, and being. And this quote by the Tibetan is so relevant. I would have this group, which I am training, forget the details about initiation and concentrate upon the far more factual realities of meaning, cause, and being. And that's what going from the lower mind to the higher mind, and then from the higher mind to the intuition facilitates this. And then eventually we go even from the intuition into the what is often referred to in the occult pantheon is the Laya point, the point of pure being. Now, how many participants, I want to see a show of hands, were able to participate in some of Michael Robbins's wonderful presentations on what he called the foundational principles of radical supra universal infinitism. Quite a definition that only Michael could come up with. So I don't know if our share with the hands is operating, but I'm going to assume that no one has.
I see Helen's hand up.
Okay, Helen, excellent. And so we will just briefly let the group read this. These three. He has an overview, and then he breaks it down into a number of different sections, only three of which we're sharing here. But I want the group to get a sense of how versatile Michael Robbins was. He was not only an amazing orchestra leader and had so much forthray with his music, but I think if I remember correctly, he thought he had quite a bit of forthray in his ray chart. And the reason why I'm doing this is so that I can share with the group how what I think Michael's approach to this was sort of like first ray, third ray, fifth ray. And again, this is not to say Michael doesn't have all of the rays that he expressed eloquently, but with this area of work that he was doing, it was really trying to approach that infinite point, that laya point, bindu, the point of pure being or abstraction. And then what we're going to do, my slides are not advancing correctly. So, okay, thank you. Okay, so we actually missed a slide, but that's all right. What I wanted to do is I wanted to demonstrate to the group that what we are going to do here and have been attempting to do, perhaps inadequately, is to gear the participant not just to raise their psychic sensitivity, not just to increase their mental agility, but to focus on that highest point within the individual self that Michael talked about in his infinitization. And the work we're going to be doing simply adds more of the fourth ray as a visual demonstration through the use of charts, graphs, tabulations, symbols, and most importantly, animations. So for any of those of you who have taken some of Michael's programs, it'll be an interesting study in ray expression.
Duane? Duane, can you hear me? Duane, can you hear me?
Okay, so what we're going
Duane?
to jump into now
Can you hear me, Duane?
Yale, if you're talking,
Okay.
Rose hears
just-
you, but I do not. And
Okay, Rose? Rose, will you tell him that several other people, Martine and Veronica and Anna, all said that they've also followed
oh, excellent.
Michael's IAB series.
Okay, thank you. I hear you clearly now. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Before we play the next video, we're going to change your internet connection.
Okay. When we get to the videos, we're going to change the internet connection so everybody will get a 5-minute break.
1 minute.
1 minute. So we know in the Ageless Wisdom teachings that everything emanates from what is called Fohat or electric electric substance. And Fohat can be active or it can be passive. Passive means that it has yet to manifest, and active would be Fohat in what is called his 7 sons, and I might add they can be the 7 daughters as well, so we don't discriminate here. And Fohat emanates from that black dot in the very center of this whirling mass of red and orange electrical substance. And it comes down through the planes, and it is the force behind all manifestation. Next slide. Another quote from H.P. Blavatsky. Fohat, or cosmic electricity, is the fiery whirlwind. And even though these images are so far away from any experience of Fohat, it's good symbolically to get a visual idea. The thread of Fohat. H.P. Blavatsky and DK also talk about that emanating thread. And keep in mind, to truly understand the rays, you have to understand motion, not just color, not just sound, not just different levels of experience, but it also relates to that place of abstraction that pierces through any obstructions, widens a gap because it creates a vortex, and all the rays shoot off from it. And we're going to go into some animations that sort of demonstrate that. The thread of Fohat. And all these circular rings, you could say, are the rings pass not of the different rays. And you could also look at it as the 7 planes, that each ray has a certain area of expression, and depending on the unit or the person or the group, it will exceed only to a certain level, and then it will wait for initiation to go to the next exponential leap upward in the hierarchy of things. Some people call this Fohat the influence behind the dance of life. You hear that sort of cliche often. And when you see these different principles in motion, as we're going to explore, you see it literally is a dance. It's not for nothing that the great Sufi masters do these dances where they twirl, and they twirl, according to authorities, into a state of ecstasy. Because this idea of movement coming down from the higher planes is first a thread of Fohat, then it's cyclic spiral motion, and then it becomes rotary motion. And they can be duplicated, at least symbolically, through sacred dance. If any of you have participated in the universal dances that are very popular in the New Age movement at this time. Fohat, or first ray force, galvanizing second ray Davic substance, which is the blue, into rotary and cyclic spiral motion. It starts as rotary motion, which is really the third aspect of divinity, and then it goes into cyclic spiral, which is the second aspect of divinity, and then it ends as the pure point of electric fire, seen as a black dot in the center of this. And the image is done almost as if it's like a fluid. And we're going to get into that in greater detail, how these different rays and planes have to be seen as different electrical fluids that have their own hierarchical order, or you might say their own individual rings pass not, but are all struggling for greater light. even the masters, it has been said, are struggling for more light in their respective positions. This may have been the opening image in one of my other presentations, but it's a very apropos one. Faux hot in the electric bridge. The Antakarana is electrical. And I have another picture here on my wall, and it's a picture of Alice Bailey, and I have superimposed upon it down below her face a golden eagle, and it is in full flight. And above it, at the top of the picture, it says, "Keep your eye on the eagle, call down fire." Symbols can be taken on many levels. Some people might see the eagle as a bird of prey. The esotericist sees it as a symbol of power and speed and intense ability to see every little detail from a very high position, often referred to as the white eagle of the north in white magic. So once again, you have the sort of, we have the red dot, which is symbol of the first ray, power, abstraction, and all of its electrical substance rotating around it. Now, when we study the 7 rays, you see the same idea here, only presented on sort of a flat relief. And you have on the left the 7 rays, on the right the 7 planes. And you'll note the exquisite tapestry of triangles. And we often think of triangles as 3 points in which energy circulates around, which is certainly the basis of all triangular activity. However, each ray has 7 subplanes. Each plane has 7, each ray has 7 subrays. Each plane has 7 our electricity just came back on. When you study triangles, and we're going to get into triangles a little deeper than we normally do in this presentation, and I'm going to open up the group to questions and shares just as soon as I'm through this section. We're almost done. This is exquisite tessellation or mosaic of interconnecting rays and planes, because they're polar opposites of each other. What you see on the left is the 7 rays with their generic relative covering.
We just lost you, Duane. I don't hear you talking. I see your screen, but that may be frozen. Hello? We don't? Okay.
I can hear you, BL, but I think maybe what happened is that when the power went on, the computer tried to connect to the other internet. But we'll see. They might drop off.
Rose, I'm trying to unmute you, but I can't. I can ask you to unmute, but it won't let me unmute you because you're a co-host.
Where's the other?
Okay, Duane is muted and you're muted. Both Rose and Duane are muted right now. And I'm not able to unmute you. Can you unmute them? Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Just gotta wait.
Okay, if we could jump
can
back
start
on
back.
the share screen. We'll continue. Our electricity went back on, which is a good indication because we have good internet connection, and we will not have these problems soon as we convert from Rose's cell phone.
Yeah, you have to
Okay,
share your screen again. There we go. There we go. We got it. We got it.
okay, we're good. Excellent. I appreciate everyone's patience. And I'm known for jumping from one subject to another, often leading to a lack of clarity. And with all these internet problems, I'm going to be organized in my thinking. So just to briefly recapitulate, we're seeing the 7 sons of Fohat here. They are the little disc in the center that divides to the right the planes and to the left the rays. And they're sort of, one side is bright white light, the other side is darkness, sort of suggesting that ultimate light in some respects can be seen as ultimate darkness. And they have been used interchangeably. So the beautiful patterns that the rays and the planes make, and if you could imagine folding this around, creating a sphere, you would see it is even more breathtaking in its beauty and its evocative power.
Duane?
Yes, can you see?
Sorry. Yes, we can see the conical shell. Um,
Okay, thank you.
And Veronica typed something in there a few minutes ago. She
Okay.
says at some previous webinar, you talked about the 6 phases of the Antakarana. Can
Yes.
you please tell the 6 phases if there is time?
Actually, there isn't, because if I did, it would take away from, but I'll be happy to give you a link that explains it from the Tibetan in greater detail. But thank you for that question. Okay, so go ahead.
Sorry. And then Michael Stacy put in there from the Theosophical Glossary, Fohat is a term used to represent the active male potency of the Sakti, female reproductive power in nature, the essence of cosmic electricity. In the universe of manifestation, let me see if I can make this bigger. In the universe of manifestation, the ever-present electrical energy and ceaseless destructive and formative power. Esoterically, it is the same. Fohat being the universal propelling vital force, at once the propeller and the resultant.
That's beautiful. Michael, thank you. That is excellent. And it really is very clarifying. So what we see here is the 7 rays with Fohat in its inactive state at the very center of the wheel or the conical shell. And then as it breathes out, it creates itself in miniature through the rays in the planes, constantly being stepped down like a fractal through the law of correspondence. And this is what is meant when you're in the lower quadrant of this, say over towards the left, the more material aspect of Fohat, it's always driving itself back to its source on the in-breath. It breathes out and all these worlds come into existence, all these lesser wheels, and then when it breathes in, it all is absorbed back into that center point, which is called pralaya. I wanted to share the quote that's coming up next by Charles Ledbetter. He said, in the works of Charles Ledbetter is described as similar to the ether of space, which is pressed back into bubbles by the energy of the logos. These primordial bubbles are coiled into spiral formations with 7 bubbles to each spiral. The bubbles are held together by the will of the logos. So what we have shown you in previous images and symbols, we're going to see next as an animation. And then after this animation, we're going to open it up to any additional questions or comments that everyone might have. And keep in mind that it is Fohat that creates all manifestation in its different degrees. And it's the one thing that keeps everything coherent, and that it can be in action or it can be passive. Because people often read some quote by DK in which it describes one aspect of Fohat, then another someplace else, and it appears to conflict, but it does not. And that was well revealed by Michael's quote. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so I want everyone to relax, take a deep breath, and imagine you're on the trip either down from Fohat, coming down through your centers, different bodies, your different sheaths, or if you prefer, spiraling upward. The motion is identical, only it's 2 different qualities of life going in opposite directions, which we will expand on a little further into the presentation. So, Excellent. Let your personal will, the will of your soul and monadic will, be under control so that you can drill holes deeper into space, deeper into these higher recesses of your own being. Excellent. So now we're going to open it up for any feedback or questions that the group may have.
So far, I don't see any hands, and if they're typing, it hasn't come through yet.
Okay. So we will continue to the second part of this presentation. And it's basically going to be on the vortex, tubes, channels, and trumpets. A quote from the Tibetan: a spiritual vortex, I'm sorry, this is Anna's contribution to one of my Facebook sites. Thank you, Anna, for allowing us to delve into your brilliant research and revelatory insights. Anna says, a spiritual vortex in the simplest terms is an energetic whirlpool. We can think of it as the universe's way of funneling its infinite energy into a specific point, offering a chance for spiritual awakening and connection. I love this, Anna, because it speaks in very clear and simple terms what others have made incredibly abstruse and abstract. It must be remembered that the substance of which these etheric channels or channeling tubes are composed is planetary prana, the life-giving, health-giving energy of the planet itself. Through these tubes, however, may flow all or any of the possible energies: emotional, mental, egoic, manasic, Buddhic, or atmic, according to the point in evolution which the man concerned has reached. This always means that several energies are pouring through these tubes. Now, here's another picture of Fohat with its fiery flames descending from a point in space. Any astronomers, astrologers might recognize those 7 stars. I'm wondering if it's the 7 stars of the Great Bear from an angle I'm not familiar with. In any event, you can see that the idea of rings pass not is the result of energies being confined in electrical and magnetic tubes. And as they undergo initiation, they widen. They can be from a very simple restricted flow in your own etheric body personally. And this etheric body creates these tubes or channels or nadi. And this is how your own little spiritual ecosystem works. These channels are all connected. And they can be coming down to a single point, or they can be flattening out like a trumpet, as we will demonstrate.
Duane?
Yes.
I'm wondering if those stars might have been the Pleiades.
That could be the 7 sisters, which we know, and you can help me here, BL, comes high monastic stimulation, 3rd aspect.
Yes, and it's also the lower of form, but it is the higher as well. So, but I'm not absolutely sure, but it seems to me to be more congruent with the stars of the Pleiades than it did the Big
Thank you.
Bear. But they're very important. They're, the seven rishis or the wives of the seven rishis. So
Yes. What we see here is a depiction of a quote by the Tibetan who states, "The centers should be pictured as whirling vortices with a closely woven threefold channel passing from each center to the other." Now, these may seem as overly technical tidbits of information, but I think it's good to get a general overview that all of the different expansions and contractions and energy receptivity that we all have is happening according to laws, and they're happening by certain scientific principles that, as the age of Aquarius dawns, will become much more scientific, not at the detriment of reaching the intuition or the higher mind, but actually as an asset or a springboard to understand it in a new way. Make it into a science. I think that's what the hierarchy is attempting to impress upon humanity at this time. Take these ageless wisdom teachings and make them more colorful, more receptive to the average spiritual person and then to humanity. And we have the means to do that with these new audio visual techniques. And with contemporary science having so many breakthroughs that are merging occult science with mainstream science. Now, for any of you who have studied DK's formulas in his Dina books, they cannot come away without a deep impression of how potent and powerful these techniques that he shares. They're techniques not just for individual use, but for group use. This is a beautiful quote where he speaks about the idea of moving from the lower mind into the abstract mind. Let me read it. "The old and outworn presentations were the product of the concrete mind, and they are therefore crystallizing in their effects and distorting in their results. The new approach which I seek to indicate makes its appeal to the abstract mind and to the soul whose values are sound, and eventually to the intuition." Now, we read that same quote in our opening of the presentation, but it's worth being repeated. And DK says in this Formula 3 that it's preserved as sounds of trumpeted words. Now, I find that a very dynamic and evocative statement. Formula, a group formula for advancement on the path. And all these formulas, although they relate to the seven rays, all of them uniformly relate to the first ray. To go back to the original idea of this presentation, understanding Fohat and cosmic electricity, that a formula can be preserved as sound. Think of all the esoteric groups you're familiar with, like the Buddhist, the Lamas, and the Himalayas, and others that do these advanced rituals with sound. They understand sound in a different way than we do. Okay, I'm going to open it up if there's any questions up to this point or anything to share.
I still don't see any hands nor comments at this point.
Okie dokie. We can see the idea of a tube or a vortex and a sphere, because every sphere has an inlet and an outlet. And that's where we get the idea of how a vortex draws in from, hypothetically, the top. There is actually no top or bottom when you're dealing with these higher levels as we understand the term, but just figuratively, you draw in the energy from the upper part, it circulates, and then it exits through the lower part, and it retains the it spreads its unique quality of ray energy or light, but at the same time it gains the experience of having moved through another life form. So it goes back to its higher level with the light of that experience. It's sort of interesting, sort of a divine ecosystem where the sacrificing unit inhabits or overshadows a lesser life, and they both gain when the big picture is seen from that sacrifice. And again, sacrifice, occultly speaking, is not giving up one thing for something lesser. It is the taking over of the new and the more advanced. So here you have all the different groups of the different masters working through. They're working through different of the sacred planets, the solar logos in the center, but you can see the rainbow connects all the ashrams. And we've shared this, so we won't go over it too extensively. And this next picture demonstrates what you've just seen if you took out the dark between all of these composite ashrams and sacred planetary men. This is what it would look like. And it looks considerably different. It sort of looks like a blender, something you blend up when you're making a smoothie. And if you think of Fohat is like the blades of the blender, it takes all these different things you throw in there that have their distinct individual existence, whether it's strawberries and peaches and bananas and apple, and through its superior power, it repolarizes all of those electrically, and part of that work is to make them homogeneous. Now, that doesn't mean they lose their separate identity, just as you can look at this image here and imagine this is everything I showed you in the previous image, only at high speed. This is why motion is so important, because only at certain rotational values do things break down their old barriers and become something new and dynamic. Any questions or shares at this point?
Nope, I don't see anything yet.
And this is a beautiful mantra from the Tibetan on this subject. But where all the groups are aflame with love and are living as souls, then the ashram becomes a vital center or vortex of force and dynamically effective. So we have to break out of the old crystallized forms of maybe what an ashram is. And the books, which we are all so privileged to study and research, will eventually be translated into different symbolic images that will complement the text. Humanity, even the advanced members of humanity, aren't ready to do away with words and text entirely, but they're searching for new ways to synthesize all of this material, which is vast. You can get lost in it. into points of abstraction, points of bright light that only the intuition and on your way to pure being can create.
Duane?
Yes,
Michael Stacy says motion reveals the nominal from the phenomenal.
yes, that's beautiful. Exactly. From the material to the pure abstract. Thank you, Michael. Now, this is another image, and imagine our solar system is seen in this way. You have the sun in the center, and yes, there's 7 sacred planets, but we know that there are others that are coming up to speed, like Mars and the Earth and others. Imagine them as being like lesser candles lit in the infinitude of space. And that is where pure being comes from, at least in our solar system. It comes from the central spiritual sun, just as the heart of the sun expresses the love vibration. And then we have the pranic sun, which is sort of the health sun that we're all quite familiar with. So they're all turning. They're all turning in this huge wheel. And yet this wheel is only a lesser wheel within a greater wheel. And that wheel is only a lesser wheel with an even greater wheel. I mean, it's staggering, and it's certainly humbling, because all of these different principles and laws are in motion. Just as we are sitting here in our seats, maybe fidgeting with all this technicality, or thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, or just moving around. We're all moving. When the group flame of love descends, we are still individual people, but we are now into the matrix of a greater life of unconditional love. Any comments up to this point?
Not so far.
Thank you. Trumpeted words. The formulas. This is from Dina 2. The idea of meaning, cause, and being underlies the symbology or the significance of the formula with which we are concerned in this instruction. I have pointed out to you before the difficulty of putting these ancient symbols or symbolic writings into such form that they can convey meaning through language. This difficulty is well-nigh insurmountable in connection with this third formula. This reason for this is that this formula has been preserved as sounds, or if I may use so ambiguous a phrase, as trumpeted words. It has not been committed to inscription, as have the 2 previous symbolic formulas, which of course is 1 and 2, which you have already received. This is sort of an extension of the quote that I gave a little earlier, only with additional clarification. Imagine the Tibetan, a high lama, a master, 5th degree, in his monastery, and he has all these scrolls at his disposal that have been passed down and saved for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And they have images written on them or crafted. And he is, through the English language, trying desperately to put these ancient symbols into such a form that they can convey meaning through language. So I, as an artist, and there are many other people doing this, and perhaps inadequately and in a very diminished way, are trying to telepathically, intuitively pick up on what he is trying to convey. And I'm going to jump to the next picture.
Duane, I think we lost you again.
Because he also says about door of initiation. Okay, are we back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Think of the door of initiation the way the Tibetan describes it. That center is in reality an opening, a door leading somewhere, a way of escape, a place through which the soul imprisoned in the body can emerge and pass into higher states of consciousness. It has also been called the funnel or channel for the sound. It has been named the trumpet through which the escaping AUM can pass. I have read this hundreds of times, and I've spent hours and hours and hours trying to give some simple representation of that. And you're looking at it right here. And then we're going to move into some animations which really are powerful. But the idea of initiation, the idea of that door of initiation as being like a vortex in which for you to enter, you have to key up the atomic substance in your physical etheric, your astral, and your mental body to some degree of the same quality as the door you're about to enter. If you had all those qualities, you'd already be initiated and you wouldn't have to enter through the door. But again, and I apologize for the repetition, this is why working on personal purification, emotional stability, and mental clarity are so important, because they are the invocative part of the 6 stages of the Antakarana. Invocation, evocation, and driving the will is the third aspect. And if you look at this carefully, you'll see coming out of the throat of this trumpet, you have the 7 rays demonstrated as conical circles. You have the 7 rays demonstrated as an elongated tube with all the different colors of the rays. And then you have this blast coming out of the front of the funnel, which is a blast of energy. And right in the very center is this thin, wavering line, the thread of Fohat. So even though many of these images may seem to be somewhat disconnected from others, we're trying to create some type of continuity here. So the AUM, at least the way the Tibetan defines it, is really the personality. The A is the physical etheric, the U is the astral body, the M is the mind, the mental, the lower mental unit. And when they become integrated and illuminated by the soul, then they have won the right to pass out of the what they call the prison of mortality, and become a perfect world server if you're looking from above down. Okay, any questions or comments?
Yes. Hold on a minute here. Let me get to it. Michael Stacy says, but the intent of all this work must be for the purpose of world service.
Absolutely. And this is why we're going to end with a meditation that is inclusive. It includes everyone in the group, and it requires their focus, their intention to send this light that we invoke, not just individually, but as a group, out into the world. And thank you, Michael, for consistently bringing that to the attention of the group. and other groups that you work with that I have the privilege of sharing with you, because that is so important. Okay, so we're going to do a little mini meditation here, and we're going to see the trumpet, the cone, the vortex in motion with music. It is very, very powerful, and you will feel the energetics of it. So take a deep breath, relax into your chair, and just leave yourself open to any impressions that you might need or want to come from your soul or the hierarchy down through you at this time. Okay, excellent. Anyone like to share how that animation worked for them? Or any general questions?
I don't see any hands and I don't see any comments yet, but people could be typing, so give it a
Okay.
second.
So now we're going to move into an extension of what we've already shared around triangles in the vortex, but we're going to try to ground it with some key charts coming up. This is a wonderful quote from the Tibetan where DK says, "You can see, therefore, that an ashram is indeed a very vortex of forces set in motion by many types of energy." And we're going to do an animation right now. Yes.
Uh, these came up right as you started the video, but Martine says, all of this is amazing. And then Joe says, I'm especially impressed with the individual tiny dots, signifying for me the individual persons in the one etheric field.
Excellent.
And what that last quote and video reminded me of, and we're talking about it in a number of different ways, but basically DK tells us that soul work is group work, that when we tap into build that antakarana to the higher mind, we're awakening to group response. And so these are all the different ways that show that by awakening the soul, by making that sacred in the true form of the word of sacrifice or the ashram, that we're buying into what that group work is that we're supposed to be doing as a whole, as a group.
Excellent. And excellent, Joe, with your share. The vortex is interesting. And in that last animation, you can see that the walls of the vortex are tainted with certain colors. And yet, if you were to spin that at high enough speed, just like we did earlier, where I was making reference to the blender, you get a different effect. But here you can see each colored section is made up of many, many dots. And you could see that individually, as Joe shared. You can see it as our souls, or you could see it as our monads. And as this great vortex turns, it can be over large time frames. And to humanity, it can be thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And yet, in the eye of the beholder, in the supernal point of abstraction, it's not even a second, not even a tiny breath. And they circulate, the colors circulate in and out the colored personality rays, soul rays, monadic rays. They cycle in and out according to certain laws. And if the group recalls when we shared the triad video in our last presentation, where you had this up and down motion of these triangles shooting off light up and down, the blue would always precede all the others because they would come into incarnation or at least descend onto a causal level to create the soul life, and then the soul life, the personality life. They would do it because it's a second ray solar system and it's a path of least resistance, where the red monads or the red souls would be the ones that would come in perhaps on a slower cycle because the conditions are not really fully optimal to have first ray monads coming in. And this is equally true of all the rays. So it's a fascinating study. But here, for a moment, for a few minutes, you can get a sense intuitively. You're entering into the dance. And you can understand the earlier comments of Blavatsky when she talked about the fiery whirlwind, that Fohat drills holes in space. Any of you who have ever done any woodworking knows that when you take a screw, just a common wood screw, and you drive it into a piece of wood, it's really a remarkable feat. And the dynamic is that this pitch on the fine tip, it penetrates, and as you screw it, you turn it cyclically, it splits wood apart and allows the screw to anchor itself. Well, Fohat does that on a much higher level. with its sharp, piercing first ray force, it moves aside dynamically all of these other lesser Davic forces. And I might add, it sets them in motion because the sheer power causes, like in a storm system, when you have electricity or you have a hot and dry and a cold and wet storm system meeting, they rotate, and Fohat drives everything before it. And it's a very, very abstract concept to deal with. And I give great admiration and praise to Michael Robbins, because he just went around and back and forth, and he was so determined to not only experience that to whatever his capacity or degree, but he had the faith and the belief that all of his students that were interested in that approach would eventually get the impact, the force, even if it's just personality force, even if it's just the force and the will of the soul, which is an expression of the monad. This is what we need and what we're working towards. It's not that we need more love. Obviously, that's a given. We need more power from the hierarchy, and particularly from Shambhala, to set things straight down here on the material plane. Power used for good. And all we see for the most part is power used for selfishness and self-aggrandizement. Okay, any comments or anything to share as we continue?
Okay. Yes, we have a couple of comments, but first, I don't know. All we can see is a black screen, and I think it's because the video ended.
Okay, well, we'll jump to the next one, and we'll nevertheless still take any questions.
Okay. Helen says, beautiful symbols of the law of magnetic impulse governing the relation between groups and kingdoms.
Yes, excellent. Where is the crossover place between initiations, between people, between all of the kingdoms, all the vestments, bodies, sheaths? How do they operate at one moment independently from the group center, and then later as one? It's a paradox. And I think we can approach the paradox more dynamically with images rather than just words. Thank you.
And then Anna says, black holes are the Laya centers of dual vortexes, expansion and contraction.
Yes, thank you, Anna. That is so true. And we're going to go into some animations that hopefully will demonstrate that concept in greater detail. But here on the physical plane, on the etheric plane, when you see a black hole, it's like a cosmic vacuum cleaner. And when you become initiated through the funnel, the vortex trumpet that I earlier outlined, it's no different than a black hole, because it's a place of abstraction, only they're bigger down here and they're on a different level. But when certain types of matter reach a certain radiation, they go back up through, and this can also be true of white holes, but they can go into a type of abstraction only to reappear on a higher level. In other words, there's different levels of abstraction. And you can't say, oh, this is the ultimate abstraction, because we're only dealing with the cosmic physical plane. What does abstraction mean on the cosmic astral, mental, Buddhic, and all these others? We don't, unless we're 6th degree initiates and above. Yes, thank you. Excellent comment. Any additional ones?
Yes, several. And then she goes on to say, by neutralizing the polarities of our subtle bodies and tuning the lower ones to the higher, we trumpet to our spiritual identity.
Exactly. It's all electrical in nature. If I took a large magnet, a circular magnet, and put it on a piece of very slick plastic that was very thin, and I took 7 smaller magnets that symbolized the 7 rays or the 7, say, planetary sacred logoi, and the center magnet, the bigger, more powerful one, was in the center. When I rotated that central magnet, guess what? All the other magnets, if they're placed correctly in a place where there's no gravity, they will all spin equally. Now think about that. It's such a simple analogy, but the greater will always ensoul the lesser. And what happens, and I don't want to go off on a toot here, electrically speaking, if you have a magnet that's very weak and you have a magnet that's very powerful, and laterally you approach that lesser magnet with the bigger magnet, that lesser magnet at first will be pushed in front of it. In other words, the polarity is not right. So it's fleeing, literally, it's fleeing from the recognition and the potency of something beyond its comprehension, which can be a little intimidating when you're going through initiation. However, when that smaller magnet finally begins to slowly become receptive to that larger magnet that's not going to give up on its pursuit to repolarize the lesser magnet, that lesser magnet slowly turns, and when it finally hits the opposite pole, bang, those two magnets come together like a bullet. And that's what happens during initiation. At first, the lowest substance in our 3 lower vehicles is repelled by these higher soul, hierarchical, and shambolic lights and energies. And it simply demonstrates at that moment in time and space, we are not ready. However, when we do the purificatory work, the different vehicles begin to shift their polarity, and that is where you go through the vortex. It's not just you pushing yourself through, it's you prompting yourself from your side of the great divide and the soul or the monad on the other side pulling you through, trying to make you whole, trying to bring you up to your optimal electrical potential. Any additional comments?
Yes, we have a number. Magda says, these rainbow animations take me to what I see forming around a candle flame, along with mandala forms, either one or other, though, depending upon my eyes' focusing modality. But the same phenomenon also happens also around artificial light sources, lighter, lampions, and so on. Colors expand around the center of any sort of light's source, what you call fohat, I guess. But they do not move in a rotating vortex as you are describing. They are fixed, concentric, expanding colored circles.
Excellent. Keep in mind that the vortex that I'm outlining and describing is only either an inlet or an outlet to a greater organism we call the occult sphere. And everything you're saying is entirely correct. And if you're able to hang in there a little longer, you will see a better representation of exactly what you're referring to, and I'm trying, however inadequately, to portray. But thank you.
And then Francis says Shambhala and the will to love.
Excellent. That's it.
Anna
That's
says
it.
this, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Anna says the seventh ray opens the door to the power of the ray one.
Yes, and that happens in several ways, and we'll get into it if we have a little time later with my compilation of all the centers the Tibetan has given us to work with on a chart, ray 1 and ray 7. And that happens in two ways. One, ray 7 at this time historically is very important because it synthesizes all of the rays, even the first ray. However, on a higher turn of the spiral, it's the first ray that creates on even a more exalted cosmic level, all the 7 rays down here in our system. Remember, there are 7 planetary rays, 7 solar rays, and 7 cosmic rays. Excellent. That was a wonderful statement.
And then Maria says purification through dissolution and concentration.
Yes, when you concentrate on the sacred, either through visually looking at art, emotionally creating high aspiration, or mentally on the ageless wisdom teachings, in whatever way that you approach it, because there's many, many paths to the same outcome, they all transmutate. Service, study, meditation, prayer are the 3 keynotes that Tibetan gives. Wherever your attention is focused, you will be. Wherever your attention is focused, you will become. That's an occult truth. Any additional comments?
Yes, a couple more. Anna says, fantastic explanation. Thank you, Duane.
Thank you, Anna, for your important contributions.
And then Joe says, am I understanding correctly that the 7 rays repeat in each level of awareness? So eventually we get 7, 7, 7, 7, and further as initiations higher and higher.
That is a statement of pure truth. And you can only really understand that through what the Tibetan outlined as the law of analogy, and particularly the law of correspondence. We, creatures of form, are often told we are expressions of the Godhead, that we are gods in miniature. But how does that actually work out in practical terms? It works out that our inner bodies, our inner sheaths, our inner chakras, they have developed a certain quality of light and a certain quality of sound. And that is reflected from the soul level, and from the soul level to the monadic level. And all we have to do to find our legitimate and lawful path of return, and not someone else's, is to study our personality in great depth. What is your mental ray? What color does it have? What is your emotional ray? What color does it demonstrate? What is your physical etheric ray? What quality of light does it demonstrate? And when you're doing the 6 stages of building the Antakarana, if you include that somewhere, you will find it will speed up your meditation exponentially. Because what you're doing is you're taking a fragment of the divine, which is veiled, and you're sending it up through these tubes and demanding recognition. You're saying, I'm here. And you can do it through prayer. Prayer is very powerful. But if you do it through occult meditation, it's 10 times more powerful. And that was well said. Thank you for sharing that.
And then Greg says, as you said, what is found within forms the world within our external worlds being manifested, like the old analogy, as above, so below, as within, so without, from Hermes Megistus, I'm sorry, I butchered that defines the possible true path of the white magician.
Absolutely. As above, so below. That we are all fractals. We are all holograms, but we have not penetrated to the center of the hologram, but we are legitimate and lawful duplications of some great being. We are destined to fully recognize as we move through life and learn all the lessons. Thank you. That was excellent.
And then Lenny says, the ray is the vital direction of the center, 4/3.
Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Thank you, Lenny.
And I think I got all the comments for the moment.
Okay. Here's a wonderful quote by the Tibetan that supports all of what everyone has said here and what we're trying to do through this presentation. And would somebody like to read it?
I can read it.
Thank you.
In the next century, when man's equipment is better developed and when a truer meaning of group activity is available, it will be possible to convey more information, but the time is not yet. All that is possible for me is to grope for those feeble words which will somewhat clothe the thought. As they clothe it, they limit it, and I am guilty of creating new prisoners who must ultimately be released. All books are prison houses of ideas, and only when speech and writing are superseded by telepathic communication and by intuitive interplay will the plan and the technique of its expression be grasped in a clearer fashion. I talk now in symbols. I manipulate words in order to create a certain impression. I construct a thought form which, when dynamic enough, can impress the brain of a transmitting agent, such as yourself. But as I do so, I know well how much must be left unrelated and how seldom it is possible to do more than point out a cosmology, macrocosmic or microcosmic, which will suffice to convey a temporary picture of divine reality.
That is
Wow.
such a powerful quotation. The limitations of the mind and yet the necessity of using it to create a firm foundation in which to launch ourselves into the abstract mind and the intuition. Yes,
Michael Stacy says, intuitive, straight knowledge.
beautiful. Intuitive, straight knowledge, where you're no longer spinning in circles and you're no longer spiraling, however useful and creative. You have entered into that place of great peace, great silence.
And then Susie says, in considering the early example of the dynamics of the turn of the screw, I was reminded of a similar symbolic analogy, the way that gears work.
Yes, when they're aligned correctly, big wheels, little wheels, each one wheeling out some particular part of a greater entity that unless you see a big picture, you could get lost on one of the smaller wheels. I recall John Lennon in one of his great musical compositions. I'm just sitting here watching the wheels spin round and round. And I often thought this is what an artist, and the art is life. It's not just some particular medium we work with, that we get tired of watching the lower mind just spin round and round. In art and study and research and meditation and prayer, they give us an avenue of escape should we choose to use it. Excellent.
Okay, that's all I've got in the way of questions and comment.
Okay. Now, this is the vortex as a cone. And within the cone, which is made up of a number of different colors, but primarily there's a first ray red on the right, third ray green at the bottom, and a sort of a blue midway up towards the left. We need to look at triangles as the lower mental initiation or stepping stone to the entry into the vortex, which is swirling. But within that vortex swirling, there will be walls, is a bad word. How about energy links? And when those three energies, ray 1, 2, and 3, are linked up, you have sort of the perfect vortex because it includes the 3 primary rays. Now, a vortex doesn't have to be the 3 primary rays. It can be 3 other different rays. And it often will because of your unique ray profile. But this picture is useful in that it demonstrates something that's more organic. Another beautiful quote that supports some of this, some of these symbols. The connection between the centers, the causal body, and meditation lies hid in the following hint. It is through the rapid whirling and interaction of these centers and their increased force through meditation, ordered occult meditation, that the shattering of the causal body is effected. When the inner fire is circulating through each center, and when the Kundalini is spiraling accurately and geometrically from vortex to vortex, the intensification interacts in 3 directions. So it's the rapid whirling of the centers that when they increase their speed and force through meditation, they shatter the causal body. Now, in the next image, we're going to see this idea presented in a little more expanded level. We have the same identical image as before, only it's on 3 different levels. And here we have taken the liberty of linking 3 different occult laws or principles that are all intimately connected, but they sound like they're separate when you read them in a text form. You have the chakras with the petals at the very bottom. It's in blue and it just shows 1 chakra. And there's no intention of showing higher chakras here, just that these chakras exist on a personality level, a soul level with more potency and force, and then of course on a monadic level with great power. These petals, as I'm going to demonstrate, do not really exist. The petals that we have studied and that have been around for thousands of years are only a preparatory stage that the student and the disciple uses to get a framework in which to approach the abstract. or that which is unknown, but lies solely within themselves. So as the energy pours down the vortex, it looks like they're petals. And if you take anything that spins and you look at sort of it three-dimensionally from the side, you will see that the overlapping colors and the overlapping spin, excuse me, give the appearance of petals, but they're whirls in a vortex. And so you have three vortices: the personality vortice, the soul, and the monad. And if you can take this vortex, these three vortexes, and imagine this simply entry or exit places for spherical lives. And that's what we're going to go into in the next animation and a couple more symbols. I realize that this is somewhat abstract, but we're going to make it visual.
Okay, hold on. You got a couple comments here.
Yes, go ahead.
Lenny says the shattering of the causal body is obtained on the atmic body of the spiritual triad.
Yes, it's atmic force pouring down the central Sushumna channel that impacts the base of the spine, and the Great Mother awakens, and we begin to understand why the third ray, when the big picture is seen, is not some mere demeaned feminine principle that I've seen some people refer to. It is the Shakti, which is the opposite pole of Shiva. And when Shakti, the great feminine power, rises in its power, in its beauty, and merges with the top of the head, you have liberation. But that could not take place unless the lowest was elevated into the highest. Now, this is a great mystery of initiation, and you can't fully comprehend some of these comments unless you have actually felt the Kundalini rising. And I don't mean in its full potency, but even in its lower forms. You're meditating, you feel this heat, not just coming from your heart center, your ajna center, your alta major, your throat center, but I mean down in the lower centers. It can be a little disconcerting for people who are not familiar with it, but it's simply the Great Mother being drawn to the Father. And it's in their fusion that the Kundalini purifies all the different heavier material matter that has prevented from continuity of consciousness from taking place, widening that central channel, and then the two come together into the divine consummation, and the divine hermaphrodite becomes recognized. This is sexless. Okay, any comments before we continue on that? Kundalini?
Michael Stacy says in the last quote, it is important to note the reference to occult meditation, likely referring to Raja Yoga, the yoga of mind, calming, control, and development.
These stages, of which even the most gifted presenter share, are just a few crumbs on a huge banquet. And we take humbly what we are given, and then we work from there. Thank you, Michael. That was an important statement.
And then Barbara asks, what happens to the permanent atoms?
Well, what happens with the permanent atoms is they become progressively shattered. Each initiation deals with one of the permanent atoms. First initiation, the physical permanent atom; second initiation, the emotional; and the third, the mental. And to just simplify this, it creates continuity of consciousness. In other words, your rings past naught is linked up with your permanent atom, and you cannot in some ways understand more than you've experienced because it's all coded and recorded in your permanent atoms. But once you're able to move energy into these higher recesses, these permanent atoms burn up and you become liberated, and your rings past naught extend to a much greater length. And they simply become like a recording agent to help you assimilate all that you've experienced. But at some point, all those material experiences don't mean anything because now you're dealing on a soul level. The Kundalini is not something that one should deliberately attempt to activate through meditation. It can be dangerous and it can be disruptive. However, and this is a very important statement, if the Great Mother moves naturally of its own accord, then one should spend more thought and seek more insight into, okay, this is something new, this is something different, and how should I work with this? And it's important that my esteemed visitors here can see the obvious difference. One is forced, not good. The other rises out of natural inclination. And this is also true of psychic abilities that we've discussed quite extensively. You should never attempt to develop psychical faculties for their own sake. When you contact the soul in its different levels, it will bestow upon you new magical powers that will help you serve better and more powerfully. Okay, good. I'm going to skip a few because I want to go right into, because we're winding down here. Okay, this is a visual example of occult meditation. And Michael, you're entirely correct. There are many types of meditation, and even within occult meditation, there are different types of occult meditation. You find out what your rays are, and then you use a technique the Tibetan freely gives in all of his work. A mantra is when you send out verbally, but it doesn't have to be just verbally. When you visualize it, it can be a silent mantra. And you send out your ray. See the man, the silhouette of the man, he has like this vortex cone trumpet. When, let's say he sounds a first ray soul mantra coming from the personality level. That goes through the ethers, and that's what you're looking at here. You're looking at that line that progresses from his ajna center, his forehead, up through the different ethers, and then at the top is the cone of the soul, the vortex of the soul. And the moment it hears, it recognizes that cry. This is what is called an occult cry. It's not just humanity's suffering cry because it's lost in this miasma of limitation and illusion. It's a cry that says occultly, I demand recognition because I am now scientifically invoking my soul and then eventually the one monadic life. So that's a very, very powerful, and it's all done through sound waves. And I would add this little footnote. That image that he's sending out is the first ray image. It looks like a sword. Well, isn't it interesting that when you sound the A full and the A of the AUM with intention and force, that from verbally, that people with recording instruments have shown on a graph that this is what it looks like. That sword is not something I created. That's sound waves that look like a sword. So when you're sounding a first ray mantra, you're actually creating a life separate from you that travels through the ethers, yet is still connected to you. And it says, I'm here. I demand recognition, not as a personality, but as a member of an integrated group so that I can better serve.
Okay. Well, we got a couple of comments now.
Okay, excellent.
Joe says, back to the makeup of triangles made of personal, soul, and monadic levels. Can a triangle be on one level in one chakra or on different levels within different chakras?
Yes, the highest point that you can aspire to in one triangle, or if you please, one vortex, is the lowest level of the next triangle or vortex that you either have to create or learn to work with. And everything is built from the personality triangle to the soul triangle to the monadic triangle. They overlap, they interpenetrate, and at some point they blend. Okay, excellent.
And then
So go ahead.
Anna says, the love of Christ lifted the Mother Mary to the glory of divine Sophia. Through Christ consciousness, we can embody the powers of God.
Excellent. And if you were a Buddhist, you would say the same identical Trinity, Atma, Buddhi, Manas, or Hindu, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma. And every major religion has its trinity of forces that sort of summarize the Godhead, and then they become differentiated when you leave those three primary forces to the ray 4, 5, 6, and 7. Thank you, Anna. That's beautiful. And remember, and this is a quote from the Tibetan, that I have given you these teachings as a Christian presentation because it's something you'll be more familiar with. But we do know he did blend and fuse esoteric Buddhism with esoteric Christianity. Okay, I'm going to skip to the next video because we're going to be out of time. And I apologize if anybody has any questions. Now, here we have the sphere populated by numerous triangles, but note that there's first the squares and then the triangles overlap. And you have the inlet at the top, the masculine vortex, and the inlet, or I should say the discharge at the bottom, which is the feminine. Remembering, again, these are occult terms and shouldn't be related to gender. And it is in this constant circulation. If you can imagine what you're looking at as the personality, the soul, the monad, any one of the 7 rays, any one of the 7 planes, you will see and imagine that there's 7 of them. And that in that 7, there are 7 lesser ones. And in those 7 lesser ones, there's lesser 7s. You go from 7 to 49 to 353. I don't know. I don't have my mental hat on for mathematics right now. But deity keeps duplicating itself in miniature. And we are the miniatures. And we want to go back to the source. So in this next animation, visualize your personality, your soul, your monad, any particular center you're working on, or even a triangle as a way of expanding that work. And just breathe it in and draw on the power of the group. All of the intention and all the people who have focused right here today are actually here for your benefit. And they will share with you, even if they're not always aware of it, that part of themselves that builds this important group. So thank you. And excellent. And we're going to skip through a few more to exit. We're going to, and we'll continue with this at our next presentation. Nothing will be lost, but I want to end with this, the fires of purification, and I want to take this invoked energy that all of us together have created and see it fused into one powerful beam of healing light that can go out across the globe, will tinctured with the quality of love, intelligently applied across the globe, linking all these triangles that will bring our planet up to a more sacred level. And feel free to use this closing fire the group is invoking to go to any particular places on the planet where there is a need for control and stability and healing, without focusing on any particular politician or person. That would be just a little bit too intense. So with this closing meditation, I want to thank everyone for coming and adding their quota of light and fire, and it makes a difference.
Savitu Vare Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Umburvasva Tatsavituvareniam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Umburvasva Tatsavituvareniam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya.
Excellent. I send my light and love and many blessings out to the group and appreciate your time, your interest, and most of all, the love that you share with those around you. Did you have anything, BL, you wanted to share, or Michael, before we exit?
Yeah, one thing, technical. I know we just changed times, so I think maybe people came later. I posted the link to the online calendar we have. If you click on the event itself inside of that, it will display in your local time zone. So you don't have to do time conversion. You just got to click the event, scroll down a little bit, and it will show you your local time zone. As long as you're not on a VPN, that's telling the net that you're in a different location. It will show in your local time based on your computer time. So, with the time zone conversion, you could just go there and see that, as well as the time in UTC, GMT. That's all.
Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you. Thank you, Duane, as always, for your wonderful presentation. I also want to remind everybody, you'll get the notices of where the link for the recordings are, and you'll get the announcement for next month, but that is going to be on the 9th of December at 6 p.m. GMT, like today's was. Okay. So thank you,
Excellent.
everybody, and especially Duane and Rose for their lovely presentations.
Wonderful.